Okay, I chose to do my speech on China's one-child policy to ensure population control. China's one-child policy restricted couples to having only one child. Unless you lived on the countryside, you were able to have 2 children if your firstborn was a girl. Due to families only being allowed to have 1 child, having a girl became extremely undesirable. This resulted in an increase of abortions for female fetuses, the number of females placed in orphanages, and many were even infanticide. This went on for over 35 years, and up until late 2015 was announced it was coming to a halt. You can now have 2 children, but it's really not that simple. After watching a documentary about this, I wanted to know more. I couldn't believe that something like this had existed. After doing some research, I decided to share my findings with you guys. In my speech, I will discuss how and why this law came about, the effect it's had on women and children, and how it's affected China as a whole. Firstly, I'm going to share the history of how it got started. China's one-child policy was established by Chinese leader Deng Xiaoping in 1979 in hope to control population growth. But China's first leader was Mao Zedong. He encouraged large families, outlawed abortion, and use of contraceptions. He urged women to produce so that way it would boost the workforce and ranks to the army. Mao's strategy caused China's population to grow from 500 million to almost 1 billion 3 decades later. Unfortunately, success was short-lived. China's food supply was decreasing, and the government reversed the campaign against contraceptions. After Mao passed in 1978, Deng took over. Due to Mao's reckless strategy, Deng knew in order to regain legitimacy, he would have to achieve economic growth. This is when the one-child policy was introduced internationally. It was initially supposed to be temporary, but like I said before, it went on for about 40 years. The policy most strictly applies to the Han Chinese living in urban areas. They make up more than 91% of China's population. But it does not apply to ethnic minorities throughout the country. Next, I'm going to tell you the details of how this law was implemented. One of the many ways they enforced this brutal policy was by fining families thousands of dollars who had more than 1 child. The Chinese government uses a quota reward system for planning officials who carry out the birth control policies. They meet their quotas by compelling pregnant women to undergo abortions, often under the threat of job loss, outrageous fines, and even personal harm. On many occasions, children were even confiscated by the authorities. If you complied, it was seen as a revolutionary good for society. Couples who abided by the mandate were rewarded a certificate of honor for single-child parents. The Chinese government even boasted that they have prevented over 400 million births and announced in March 2013 that they performed over 336 million abortions in the last 4 decades, including 196 surgical sterilizations. One of the many consequences China faces is the growing gender imbalance. When families were forced to shrink their household, they chose sons because traditionally males were preferred. Sons were supposed to inherit the family name, the property, and responsible for taking care of their parents. China's government has stated that they could possibly come home to the most elderly population on the planet, over 400 million people over the age of 60. If people don't start having more children, they're going to have a severely diminished workforce. The ratio is about 5 working adults to 1 retiree. A great majority of senior citizens in China depend on their children for support after they retire, and there are fewer children to support them. I skipped a part, but I'm going to read it anyway. This is why, females were unwanted because of the law implemented. So that's why they were undesirable. Many were sent to orphanages and abandoned. Luckily, tens of thousands were adopted by families in the United States. There are about 118 boys per every 100 girls. This also means less women available for marriages, which causes a serious social problem. Another concern, like I said, is the growing population of elderly people, which I already went over. However, things have gradually improved over the years. In 2013, a relaxation of the policy allowed over 12 million couples to apply to have a second child. Surprisingly, only 12% of eligible couples applied. Why is that? Finally, in 2016, the Communist Party made the decision to allow families to have more children to improve the balanced development of the population, as well as to deal with an aging population. Despite the new policy, couples are still opting to have one child because it has become the social norm. Although they have long cherished large families, the system has changed people's outlook on having children. Some say the economic pressure to raise children is too high and can't afford it. So many think the new policy will not raise the birth rate enough. Women who actually even want to have two children still do not have the freedom of their own choice. And the process of applying to have a second child is extremely long and lengthy. You must provide a birth certificate, marriage license, residency permits, etc. The state continues to have control, and unfortunately, as long as the government has their surveillance and quota system in place, women will not be able to enjoy reproductive rights. Even though China is trying to make a positive change, they will struggle to get back on their feet. I hope I was able to open up your eyes and raise some awareness to what's going on in the world around us. I chose this topic because I knew it had to be shared. I'm going to end with a quote that someone stated while being interviewed about the policy. It's not just a problem if you permit ordinary people to have one or two kids. It's about returning their reproductive rights to them. In over 200 countries and regions around the world, which other control nowadays, who have reproduction laws like this. So that's my speech, and here on my computer, I'm going to show you guys a graph which shows when the one-child policy was implemented. This is the rate that it went down of how many younger children there were, and so clearly, when they did the one-child policy, the rate for the younger population went down, and here goes the older population right down here, showing that it went up when the policy was implemented. So that's my speech. Those are my graphs. Thank you.
Thank you.
That felt like forever.
It was definitely longer than 5 minutes.
Do you think so? That was
So
forever.
7 minutes.
Does it have to be at least 5?